Hello everyone, my name is Donnies Bendicio, a licensed psychometrician from Lahok Training Center, and welcome to the series of Theories of Personality featuring trait theories. Okay, so welcome to this series, and for your inquiry suggestions, you may reach us through our email address that is hr.lahok@gmail.com, and for our Facebook account that is facebook.com/lahok. TC, you can comment your suggested topics for our next session. Now, let's talk about Henry Murray's personology. Now, Henry Murray lived from May 13, 1893 up to June 23 in 1988. So he is known as a American psychologist from Harvard University and also an undergraduate studies in history at Harvard in 1915, graduated his degrees in medicine and biology from University of Columbia. And also, he received his PhD biochemistry from University of Cambridge and director of Harvard Psychological Clinic in 1928 and 1937. He developed this theory based on need and press of personality called what we call personology. Together with Christian Morgan, the Harvard professors co-developed this thematic apperception test. But we will focus only to the theory and principles, concepts underlying with what we call the personology of Henry Murray. Now, Murray's personology aims to identify themes, the needs, as we have discussed, and also the environmental influences to a person's personality and behavioral tendencies. In contrast with other quantitative and perception experimental approaches, Murray had been determined rather longitudinal studies of thematic apperception tests and some experiment on Office of Strategic Services or OSS. Now, personology is likely derived from the principles of Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, right? So, where it demands or determines the individual's personality being formed by past experiences. Murray and his colleagues determined or investigated human behaviors, emotions, preferences, and interpersonal connections, which led to the publication of his book, what we call this the Explorations in Personality in 1938. Now, Murray suggested that personology is a holistic approach to explain the individual's personality. According to APA in 2020, they said that personology is based on individuals' actions and reactions. What is that? So, thoughts and feelings and personal and social functioning can be understood only in terms of the whole person's experience. All right. So, in this theory, personality serves as a mediator between the individual's fundamental needs or important needs, the demands of the environment, and the complexes that the person has, and of course, the past experiences that the person had. No. So, Murray suggested that there are principles of what we call the personality. Why we develop the personality that we have right now. So the personality tends to develop over time. So it dynamically develop the person's personality response to the complex, the elements and other specific environment, no, which explain the following principles. So number one, he suggested that personality is being directed by a person's cerebral or brain physiology. According to Henry Murray, a person's personality cannot exist without the brain. So basically, our personality is being derived from the physiological activities of our brain. And of course, the person aims to decrease this tension, the physiological and the psychogenic needs. We will discuss that later on, okay? So the personality developed by all the events that happen in a lifetime. Okay? So personality can also change and progress, and person has some different characteristics and others that are experienced by everyone. Okay? So Murray's personology focuses on how personality was organized in terms of the complexes or the uh, experiences from the past, the thema or the combination of what we call the presses and needs. We will discuss that later on. But first, let's proceed with the divisions of the personality. According to Henry Murray, uh, the personality is divided into three parts. Basically, it is the id, the superego, the ego. Okay, it is almost the same with Freud's division of personality, but there are some instances that he modified this definition of the personality divisions. Okay, so let's proceed with the id. What is id? It contains the desirable impulses such as empathy and love. But of course, this is the depository of the impulsive tendencies such as our primitive, the amoral, and the lustful tendencies that we have. So it is almost the same with Sigmund Freud. So it gives this motivation, this energy level, and a control of the behavior according to Henry Murray. So most likely, Murray's theory is also balanced with Jungian analytic psychology, which considers the shadow archetype with both good and bad aspects. Now, he suggested that a person's id contains the tendency to empathize, to imitate, and to identify. So these are the good characteristics of the id. So it forms of love that other than the lustful ones and the tendency to master one's environment. In contrast, we have what we call the superego. Superego tends to shape our personality based on the expectations and the values provided by our parents, by the authority figures, by the culture that we have. So it is the internalization of these values, these norms. So we get from our culture, the body of the superego probably is inflicted to a child by our parents, o kaya by their parents and authority figures, by their friends or peer group, and the cultural values and beliefs system. Compared to Freud's perspective, it appears that Murray's perspective that the superego is not in the constant conflict with the id or the impulsive desires of the personality. According to Freud kasi, as Freud proposed, because of the id contains these good forces as well as bad ones, that is cannot be found in Freud's perspective. But good forces do not have to be defeated according to Henry Murray. So the superego must try to stop the socially unacceptable impulses, but it also operates to determine when an agreeable need can be expressed and provided. Now, superego has this what we call the ego ideal. So ego ideal is a component of the superego which contains the moral or ideal behaviors for which a person should gain or strive. Now, we also have the ego or the organizer of our behavior. This is broader conception than Freud's ego definition. The ego is the reasonable ruler of the personality according to Henry Murray. It decides to alter the its unacceptable impulses. Now, Murray proposed that the ego is the primary organizer of our behavior. It tends to actively decide the plans and plans the regulation of the pleasure principle by organizing our own behavior. Now, ego basically mediates between the id and the superego and may favor one over the other. So, how does this happen? For instance, the ego may support the id. So it may direct our personality, it may direct our behavior toward socially unacceptable actions because it is basing on our impulses. But because our ego plays a rational decision for both superego and the pleasure principle, which is the id, it may also combine these aspects of personality that we want to do. Okay? So next one, we also have the complexes and the developmental stages of what we call the child's developmental stages. Let's proceed with this. Murray suggested 5 stages of child's development, and it is characterized, each stages is characterized by what we call the pleasurable condition, or what we call the complexes, which likely gauge or direct our behavior in life. Now, according to Henry Murray, he suggested that it is normal for a person to have these complexes. It is normal, okay? So unless they will be extremely fixated on certain stages, we will discuss that later on. In such a case, the person might be unable to improve as it interferes the healthy development and formation of the self or the ego. The following are the proposed complexes. Okay, we have a claustral complex, oral complex, anal complex, urethral and genital or castration complex. Let's proceed with what we call the claustral complex. So what is called claustral complex? It is characterized by our feelings of security when we were in our mother's womb. So a person who has this complex tends to be passive, tends to be more dependent on the other, so almost always want to seek safety and security from the previous behaviors and habits. So there are types of claustral complexes. So this may include the simple claustral complex. So it is likely described by our feelings of comfort, safety, wish to be in warm, dark, and small places. For example, a person might take time to remain under the sheets or what we call the blankets instead of getting out of bed in the daylight. Of course, we also have the in support type of this complex. The in support type centers on the feelings of insecurity and helplessness, which cause the person to fear and to open spaces to new or change of environment. Okay. And the last one, we also have the anti-claustral or aggression form. So it is based on our need to leave the womb-like condition. So because of this fear of confinement, a person may tend to show his or her interest to this kind of form of like they prefer open spaces, traveling, and change. So this is in contrast with what we call the claustral complex, the anti-claustral, or what we call the aggression form. Now let's proceed with the oral complexes. Oral complexes refer to the sensual pleasure or the sucking nourishment while being carried. Okay, so the oral complexes or the oral suckerance complex formed by our mouth activities and somewhat passive tendencies and the demand to be carried and protected. So a person may show behavioral manifestations in this kind of complex, such as kissing, eating, what else? Sucking, what else? Drinking, and hunger for affection, sympathy, protection, and love. Okay, we also have what we call the oral aggression complex. It is combined with the oral and aggressive behaviors. This may include biting, spitting, shouting, verbal aggression such as sarcasm. We also have what we call the oral rejection complex. It includes vomiting, being picky about food, what we eat, so eating little, fearing oral contamination such as from the kissing, desiring seclusion, and avoiding dependence on the others. So that is what we call the oral complexes. Now let's proceed with the anal complexes. Ano ba itong anal complexes na ito? So refer to the pleasure brought by defecation. So it is likely refer to the anal rejection complex. For instance, a person might feel that there is a preoccupation with the defecation and feces like materials such as dirt, mud, plaster, and clay. More often, aggression is being characterized in this type of complex and can be likely observed in behaviors such as throwing or dropping things, firing guns, or sometimes getting into explosives. A person who is likely seen with this kind of complex may be disorganized and more frequently dirty. Now, in contrast, there is what we call the anal retention complex. The anal retention complex is characterized by cleanliness and orderliness. Okay, so again, the anal retention complex is different to what we call the anal rejection complex. This anal retention is sometimes preferred to save and accumulate or collect things while considering being neat, being tidy, being clean, or sometimes more likely of being ordered, having this orderliness. Now let's proceed with the urethral complex. Urethral complex is most likely accompanied by urination. When we say urethral complex, it is most likely called the what we call the Icarus complex. Okay, the Icarus complex is derived from the mythical Greek figure who flew so close to the sun that the wax holdings of his wings melted. So, like Icarus, a person has this urethral complex aimed to relatively ambitious and too high goals, and eventually dreams of often shattered by this failure. So this complex is often associated with excessive ambition, exhibitionism, sexual cravings, and self-love, and sometimes a distorted sense of what we call the self-esteem. And lastly, we have the genital or what we call the castration complex. What is this genital or castration complex? So this refer to the genital pleasures. Okay, so Murray disagreed with Freud's contention that fear of castration is the core of anxiety in adult males. So he said that he interpreted the castration complex is narrower and more literal fashion as boys fantasy that his penis might be cut off. So Murray believed such as a fear of growth out of a childhood masturbation, and that parental punishment may be inflicted when found out may have accompanied with this. Okay, so we have what we call the theme. The theme is characterized by this combination of what we call the press and the needs. So when we say press, it is the environment and childhood experiences. So it may include the alpha and beta and the needs of what we call the primary and the secondary. So the thema or tend to organize these two principles, the press and the needs. So the tendency in our behaviors in various circumstances tend to be gauged or tend to be organized by what we call the thema. Let's proceed with what we call the press. Okay, so Henry Murray identified alpha and beta press. So, for an instance, a person who aims to be an executive may tend to experience a different press, which will gauge his needs and behaviors. So, we have the alpha. So, when we say alpha, it is the objective characteristic of the stimulus we tend to sense. So, for an instance, a person might expect that he's going to be an IT professional or build an IT business after graduation. So this is the objective of the person. So to please or to have this gauge to behavior to build his own IT business, because his family or his colleagues expect him to build his own business. Now we also have the beta press. So the beta is the interpretation of the stimulus that the person experienced. For example, as interpretation of this expectation from his family members, from his colleagues, he might pursue a career in IT. So this is how he interpreted this experience. So he might be employed to IT services and tend to absorb all the knowledge, the skills and experiences, and then eventually build up his own IT company. So the alpha basically it is the objective, and the beta it is what we call the interpretation, how you interpret the what we call the experience or the objective experience that you had. Now we have the needs. So basically, needs are interconnected to one another. And Murray suggested that we have the primary and secondary needs, which we will be discussed later on. Okay, so Murray suggested, for an instance, a person may have this tendency to accomplish something difficult, okay? And this might include obstacles and other high standards to reach such achievement. In order for him to achieve such goal, he might consider to trigger the need to manipulate others or affiliate himself with the bigger organization or a circle of friends which likely facilitate his way up to the achievement or aiming or of what he is aiming for. Okay, so another case of needs might be in a form of conflict of need which another person might experience. For instance, a person might be dominating sometimes and may have the need for affiliation. For this example, a person may excessively show dominance to his friends, to his colleagues. He might tend to control others. So this may lead to pushing his colleagues away or friends or other significant others away because of his dominance or because of this controlling behavior. So Murray suggested that our needs tend to manifest in our behavior and relatively process in our unconscious. So we may not be aware of these tendencies of our behavior. So with that, we may not be totally aware of these tendencies. Okay, so these needs differ in terms of the urgency with which they drive behavior. So a characteristic, Murray called this what we call the needs prepotency. So for example, if the needs for air and water are not satisfied, so which this is what we call the primary needs, they come to dominate behavior, taking precedence over all other needs. Okay, so there are two types of what we call the needs. We have the primary needs, as we have discussed. These are the biological needs, such as your food, the water, and oxygen. So, on the other hand, we have the secondary needs. So, these are most likely characterized by our psychological needs, or what we call the psychogenic needs. The primary needs is also called as viscerogenic needs, while the secondary needs is what we call the uh, psychogenic needs. Okay, so let's proceed with different types of what we call the secondary needs. When we say secondary needs, it may include the what we call achievement needs. So achievement needs are related to our accomplishment and need for appreciation by the others. So the need for achievement is often represented by winning, achieving purposes, and overcoming hindrances. So the need for recognition is met by increasing social status, okay, and promoting achievements. So sometimes the ambition needs even include the need for exhibition or the desire to shock and thrill other people. We have the achievement need. So this is the accomplishment of something challenging to learn and manipulate or organize physical objects. So the human being tend to overcome obstacle just to attain this high standard or rival surpass others. Okay, so we also have the autonomy. When we say autonomy, is to get free or shake off the restraint or break out of confinement, to resist or to resist the restriction, to be independent and free to act according to our own desire. So to defy conventions. We also have the harm avoidance. So from the word itself, it is to avoid harm or the pain, the physical injury, the illness, the death. So the escape from dangerous situation basically. To take precautionary measures. We also have the infavoidance, the what we call the avoidance for humiliation. So we tend to quit embarrassing situations or to avoid conditions which may lead us to indifference of others. So we tend to refrain from action because of the fear of humiliation, the fear of failure. This is what we call the int avoidance. Okay, we also have the exhibition. When we say exhibition, it is our need to impress others. So we tend to have this need to be seen. We tend the need to be heard, to be uh, to be seen as someone who is being fascinated by others, or we want to entertain or amuse others. Okay, we also have the materialistic needs. When we say materialistic needs, this is centered by our acquisition, the construction, and obtaining items such as buying material objects that we desire. For example, things that we want to create. So, obtaining and creating items that are important, part of the materialistic needs, to keep us this object and organizing them it is important for us. So, order it is the putting our needs, our things in order. So we tend to achieve cleanliness, we tend to arrange them, we tend to organize them, we tend to be neat and precise about it. Okay, we also have the power needs. When we say power needs, it tend to center our own independence as well as our need to control others. How is that? So Murray suggested that autonomy was a powerful need, okay, involving desire for independence and resistance. So other key power needs that he identified include abasement. So abasement, it is the confessing and apologizing. Sometimes we also have the aggression. Sometimes for us to achieve power, we tend to attack or ridicule others. We also have this blame avoidance. Okay, sometimes we tend to follow the rules and avoid blame. We also have the deference, controlling our deference. This is what we call the obeying and cooperating with others. We also have the dominance. It is the controlling one. Okay. So for the last one, for the next one, we also have the affiliation. When we say affiliation, it is the affection needs or the center to be desired, to be loved and be loved. Okay? To love and be loved. So we have the need for affiliation and seek out for the company of others. How is that? So affiliation needs is also what we call the nurturance and taking care of other people. We also tend to have this importance for the psychological well-being, the need for succurrence or helping others and protect by others. So Murray suggested that play and having fun with other people may also include this affiliation needs. So affiliation tend to identify the drawing, the enjoyably cooperate and reciprocate with our allies, okay? So our friends and our colleagues. So who resembles on our own likes. So we adhere and remain loyal to a friend or loved one. We also have the abasement. When you say abasement, it is to submit passively to external force, to accept injury, the criticism, the punishment, and become resigned to fate. And also, we have to admit our inferiority, our error, our wrongdoing, our own defeat. This is what we call the abasement, to blame and belittle or mutilate the self. Okay, we seek and enjoy pain and punishment or illness because we want others to accept us. We also have the affiliation needs. Okay. And then the last one, we have the sensual needs, the play, sentience, and sex. Okay, when we say play, it is an act of having fun without further purpose. We also have the sentience, to seek and enjoy sensuous or impressions. Okay, we also have the sex. Of course, it is to form and further an erotic relationship or intimate relationship with other people or other person, to have a sexual intercourse. Okay, so we also have the information needs. The information needs tend to a center or mediated around both gaining knowledge and sharing it with others. We have the understanding. It is the need to be inclined to analyze events and to generalize the data that we have to discuss and argue and to emphasize the reason and logic that we have to state one's own opinion. Okay? So Murray suggested that a person may have a natural tendency and ability to grow. And he suggests that a person can change with the use of creative and rational thinking because of the division of the personality that we have, and of course the needs, the presses, and concepts that are involved in what we call the personology. Okay, so these are the references that we have for this session, for this evening, or for this day. So if you have questions, please send us message through our Facebook account or through our email address, and you may comment your suggested topics for our next session. For that, thank you so much, and we will see you in the next video.